Okay, we're back. This is 2 lives in less than 24 hours. This is a new and fun one, though. Very excited about this. So we're going to let everyone get on here. And as always, I'll just try to figure out what the hell is going on and try to find the person. So excited to be joined by AOC today. It's going to be amazing. There's obviously a lot of talk and confusion and understandings about what the COVID relief stimulus package is and how we access and who gets information. So no better person to talk to than one of the architects of it. So I will try to find where she is. There she is. Okay. Boom. AOC. Okay.
Karen, hey.
Hey!
We got it to work. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How you doing?
Good. Obviously, it's been a crazy couple weeks for everybody, but
insane.
We were able to pass this bill yesterday, and it's something. So we're making baby steps, baby progress.
Insane. I mean, I think I speak for the nation in saying that we're thankful for all of your guys' work, yours in particular. You always have such a strong voice out there. So thank you so much. I was gonna put a blazer on because I was like, I'm talking to a politician. Like, I can't be just in my hoodie that I've been in for 5 days, 12 days, 18 days.
No, it's okay.
Here we are.
There are no
I know. I was like, you know what? Why am I stressing? I'm just getting on IG Live, talking to a congresswoman. So, yeah. Okay. I mean, there's so. Well, first of all, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm good. We're having a tough time. It's New York City. I represent New York City, and I represent Queens. So obviously, we're the hardest hit. So right now, it's really just about rallying around our frontline workers, our nurses, our doctors, but also our essential workers, our delivery workers, our grocery store clerks, our care workers, literally everyone that's out there. If you're out there, on that front line, there's 2 things that we need to do right now. One of us is that one thing is that if you can, our job is to stay home. But there are a lot of people that can't stay home.
Right.
And
exactly.
If you're out there staying home, if you're out there because you can't stay home, we just want to express our gratitude to you for keeping everything running. And the best we can do is to fight for you, to fight for all those people out there, to make sure that they're getting paid a living wage, that they have access to adequate health care, that you're taken care of. So,
for
that's
sure.
What we're
Yeah, I know you're like on the front lines in so many different ways. It must be kind of insane. I know I keep rage monologuing at Sue about people that are out and about doing things and wanting to just have their life go on as normal. And she's like, it's okay. It's going to be okay. We just got to let people know. But the only thing that people like us can do is, try to give some content to the world and stay home and do nothing. Okay. Absolutely. So COVID, I don't even know exactly what it's called. Relief package. I actually I love what you said the other day. I think it was on Senate floor or whatever floor you guys get on. But you talked about your mom being an hourly worker. My mom is as well. She is a waitress, and she was like, this is so crazy. I literally had to file for unemployment the first time in my whole life. What does this mean? What are we doing? So that just hit me so hard. So that kind of got me going. I'm like, I don't know enough about this bill to be able to talk about it or what it is. So obviously one of the architects of it, we want to get you in here. Let's just start with the basics. What is a stimulus package? Why do we need it? But particularly this one, what is it?
So obviously, we're facing a crisis right now, but it's 2 crises really at the same time. The first one is that it's the public health crisis of the actual coronavirus. This thing is spreading. It's highly contagious. And the thing is, I know there are folks saying for a long time this is like the flu. If you have the flu, you realistically can give the flu to 1 to 2 other people. If you have coronavirus, you can give it to a lot of people. So the reproduction rate of the virus is really high. So this is a public health crisis, but obviously it's also an economic crisis. Because the virus is so contagious, we're shutting down entire cities from regular business. And that means that millions of people are out of work. 3.3 million people filed for unemployment about in the last week alone. And we know that that's not the full number, because up until yesterday, the amount of people that could file for unemployment did not include gig workers, hourly workers. You know, if you're doing Uber or Lyft or Instacart or anything where, or if you're just a freelancer and your business has dramatically dropped, before yesterday, you couldn't file for unemployment. So that 3.3 million is just a portion of the amount of people experiencing a crisis right now. So obviously, one of the things that a responsible government would do is to move to try to protect those people. Now, you know, there's all these arguments aside, as I was saying on the House floor, I don't think this is enough, but it's something. And so let's start with what that something is. The first thing that's in this bill that was passed yesterday is that there is going to be direct cash assistance to the majority of people in this country. That cash assistance, if you make less than $75,000, you will be getting a $1,200 check.
How do you get that? Like, how literally do you get that? Is it just coming to you automatically? Do you have to sign up for it? Is it coming direct? I've heard like you can only get it if you have direct deposit. Like, how is it?
So it comes through a couple of different ways. So first of all, the money is based on your last tax return, either 2019 or 2018. So, this is one of the first things that I argued about, because you could have been fine in 2018 and you could be in trouble now. And so there's some discrepancies here. So if your financial situation has changed a lot, my first piece of advice is to file your 2019 return ASAP. I don't know which kind of filing date the IRS has to figure out a couple of things. So there are some questions that are in the air. But this money is being based off of your 2018 or your 2019 tax return, whichever one is more recent. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when you file your taxes, especially if you file it online or if you do TurboTax or however you file your taxes, if you have direct deposit set up with the IRS, like when you get your tax refund check, if the IRS just wires it to you, you will get your check earlier than if they have to mail you a check. But if you don't have direct deposit, you will still get a check. It'll just take a little bit more time, which is even more reason to, I would say, file your 2019 return so that you can just set up the direct deposit, and perhaps that could come to you a little bit earlier. So it'll come one of two ways: direct deposit or a mailed check. If you have the direct deposit set up, $1,200 will be wired to your bank account, and that will happen at the earliest in about 3 weeks. So the Treasury Department is saying that they're going to try to get this together in about 3 weeks. If you do not have direct deposit, it's going to take longer, which is why I'm like hooting and hollering on the floor.
Get online.
Need help right now.
Last week, people need help last week. I mean, it's crazy.
And I so appreciate that you're talking about how your mom is an hourly worker too, because I think sometimes things happen for us really quickly. I won my primary overnight. I was literally a waitress and, things like that. And you were working, and all of a sudden it's so many people realize you're the GOAT of women's soccer and just, stuff in general. So, but we're real people, and your mom works an hourly job. She's a waitress like I was. And my mom, she works hourly. She's a school secretary. And so now that school's suspended, she's not a salaried employee. She works hourly at a school, and now schools are suddenly closed. And we have to figure out what we're going to do with her too. And so
I think people don't realize how many the majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And that doesn't mean that you're struggling every single month, but it means that you rely on a certain amount of income every month. And now immediately that's stopped. And not only is you lost your job, but you can't go get another job. So many portions of the economy and jobs are just shut down. So people like just need this money immediately. And then,
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to get $1,200 each. So, you know, my parents, there's two of them, so they'll get $2,400. And I'm like, okay, well, what happens next month? Because that money's not going to last very long. So
exactly.
What are the other benefits that are packaged in with this for just like the normal average American?
Yeah, so the main other benefit that you are getting on top of this is if you are out of work right now, unemployment insurance has been expanded and extended to way more people for more money. So the amount of unemployment insurance that people get in each state varies by the state. So, you know, Florida doesn't really give as much as, say, New York does. But in this bill that was just passed, we are upping the amount that is going to be delivered in unemployment. So it's going to be an additional up to $600 on top of what your state gives you. So it's your state unemployment plus up to $600. And that
will come like from the government.
And that's going to come from the government as well, but it's going to be administered through your state government. So you have to apply from your, so basically your $1,200 check is coming straight from the US government. Your unemployment check is coming from your state. The federal government is giving the state the money, and then the state will just lump it in one check and give it to you. So that's how unemployment is working. And the other part that we've done in expanding unemployment is not only are you going to get more money, but the amount of people eligible for that money has increased. So all of those folks that have been laid off due to gig work, freelancing work, etc., they previously were ineligible for unemployment insurance. Now you'll be able to apply.
Okay, that's what I was wondering too. So all like gig economy and all that, they're taken care of. Is there any sort of provision or protections in for like a student visa or work visa and like undocumented workers, which frankly I think have probably been totally left out of the conversation, but which are, you know, the major gears of this economy and of our society that, you know, people just want to pretend like they aren't, but I'm like, it can't go on without those people. So is there any protections or anything in there for them, or how is that working?
So like, again, I've been talking about a lot of the drawbacks in this bill. Literally what we were told from the Republicans, what I've been told in the negotiations with Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump and like all of these folks, is that they said anything for immigrants is a non-starter. So if you are undocumented, they would not pass anything for you. And here's the thing that's important, because a lot of folks are saying like, oh, you know, AOC wants undocumented people to get free checks, as though we are giving money to people who don't contribute to our society.
Right.
Undocumented immigrants pay taxes. We pay, undocumented people pay like to the tune of $14 billion in taxes. And that means that undocumented people who are making our food, cooking in restaurants, stocking our stores, they pay more in taxes than Facebook does, than Amazon does, than a lot of big banks and GM does. And so, frankly, we're using public money to fund a lot of these corporations that aren't paying into this pot, and we're cutting out people who are paying into this system. So it's really important that we debunk this idea that undocumented people live off of our public systems for free, because we send our kids to public schools on the taxes that undocumented people pay. We send people to the ER, we build our bridges, we build our roads. Undocumented people pay billions and billions of dollars in taxes. They deserve to, and like you said, there are essential workers. They're the folks that are, you know, when we go to the grocery store, and if we're lucky enough to pick up limes or lemons or spinach, they're the folks that are putting that on the shelf. They're the agricultural workers, they're delivery drivers, they're the folks in our grocery stores. And when we order takeout, they are folks that are prepping our food, and they deserve the dignity of that protection too. So that's something that I think needs to be an ongoing fight that we really need to raise our voices about. And if you ever hear, it's an important myth to debunk when people say, you know, oh, why should we give someone why should we give an undocumented person protections because they paid for them.
They've paid for it, and they're working, and they're like a vital part of the economy. Is there more conversation? So obviously we passed this package now, and there's certain, you know, the $1,200 and the expanded unemployment. Is there talk of, like, you know, we're not going to be open, you know, certainly by Easter or anytime close to that. Is there talk of next month, when we're still in this and still here, to add on? Is there option to add on to this stimulus package if we get down the road and clearly we're not opening up, or expand it in some ways, or it's becoming clear? I think it's probably already clear that this is not going to be enough for the average American.
Yes. So the House is pushing for more packages.
Okay.
In fact, so I sit on the Financial Services Committee with Chairwoman Maxine Waters. And she and myself and a lot of amazing other members, Ayanna Pressley, Katie Porter, Rashida Tlaib, we're all on this committee together. And we drafted actually kind of like a people's bailout. And so we fought for a lot of additional provisions that we're hoping to get into next packages. So one of the things that we're fighting for is $2,000 monthly for people who need help. The other thing that we're fighting for is rent and mortgage payment suspensions, also for people who need help. We want to make sure that people's credit scores aren't getting dinged if you have to miss a payment because of all of this. There's a lot of other provisions that we're fighting for in this bill. There is talk of more packages coming up, but it will only happen if we really start to like get loud about it. Because the Senate does not want to pass it. Mitch McConnell
they ain't trying to. We would have had $1 trillion more if the tax bill wouldn't have been passed last year. One more question that came through a lot. There's a lot of college students that are still claimed by their parents, but they're out of the age range to be, you know, considered kids, but they're not able to get the money. Where do they fall in all of this for their parents and for themselves?
So this is a really important conversation for folks to have in their families, especially if your parents have not filed their 2019 yet. If you are claimed as a dependent, there's no money, period. Like, it's a messed up loophole. It's really, really messed up. But if in 2018, if you are claimed as a dependent and you are above 16, there's nothing. So my advice would be, if you haven't filed 2019 yet, talk to your parents and sort that out, because there's a way that you could file it where everyone can get $1,200 who's eligible. And then there's a way that you could file it where you don't get it. So it's really important to talk to your parents and talk to folks about that, because it's going to be a really important provision. And I would say make sure that you get that out right away. Because the whole point of claiming someone as a dependent is to get a tax credit.
Right.
So now that this additional thing has been kind of split out, make sure that you talk to your parents about doing that. And if you file, and you could potentially file separately in time.
Okay. We also got a lot of questions about small businesses. So there's a lot of money in here for small businesses. It's so confusing to me. I don't understand it all. So the questions we got were like, okay, layoffs versus still paying your employees, and then are you going to get that money back, or should you lay them off? They get that. What's the loan situation? Like, what's the payroll tax? What's the credits? What's kind of break that down for all the small business owners out there?
Yes.
A lot of them who have, you know, essentially had to shutter their entire operation. Like, I have friends that have sports centers, and so obviously it's all about, like, kids come, they rent the sports centers, and, you know, everything has to be shut down now. So they're kind of like, what do we do here?
So the main form of relief that has been kind of doled out to small businesses, I believe it's around to the tune of $300 billion. And basically it's a combination of loans and grants, mostly loans, except a lot of those loans will be eligible for forgiveness if you keep your folks on payroll. There's a lot of provisions in here, so I definitely encourage folks to kind of Google, and they're like kind of full articles on all of the provisions in the bill. But essentially, the way that this works is that Congress has authorized a disaster loan relief program, which means that they've expedited loan processing. So if you are a small business, you can get access to a disaster loan that will help you cover payroll, rent for your business, etc. If you keep your folks employed, if you keep your employees on payroll, those loans will be eligible for forgiveness down the road. And so,
meaning you don't have to pay them off,
which means you are eligible to just not pay them off. So it starts off as a loan, and it could essentially roll over into a forgiveness program. But again, there are provisions, and I encourage people to kind of look at the timing of it. It's, you know, how many months it is. I believe it's about until September, but again, I would encourage you to just kind of Google, like there's a bunch of write-ups on the small business provisions, and there's a lot of documents, and I'd be happy to kind of forward them to you afterwards so that folks can really dig in and small business owners can dig in. But there is relief. There is relief there. Again, you know, like I think it should be more. I think that we should be really doing a lot more work for small businesses. But I think, you know, the chairwoman, Nidia Velasquez, did so much incredible work in making sure that in really pushing for small business protections in this bill. And if it wasn't for her, I don't even think we would be having this forgiveness. So it starts off, anyways, it starts off as a loan, but it could essentially roll over into a grant. If you make sure that you meet certain provisions like keeping people employed.
Okay. And then with that, and this might go into individuals as well, like rent, obviously evictions have been stayed in a lot of places, mortgages, those are sort of put on hold right now. And how does that affect not only the person who has it, but also, you know, the landowners and all of that? What's going on with rent and mortgages and all that?
So so on the rent and mortgage level, that's on the state level. So the federal government, we were pushing for rent and mortgage moratoriums in this bill so that they could be suspended for a lot of people nationally. Again, Republicans stripped it from the bill, but there is relief for people depending on what state you live in. So there are places where there are eviction stays. So what does that mean? It means that if you cannot pay your rent right now, and some places have like 30, 90-day eviction stays, you will not be forcibly removed from your home. And so just from a very base level of survival and making sure that we're keeping people in their homes, that is what an eviction stay means. New York has it. I believe California has it. Miami-Dade County started it as well. They were one of the first municipalities to move on it. So there are eviction stays. Now there are some states that went a little bit above and beyond where they put mortgage moratoriums. So in New York, Governor Cuomo called for a mortgage moratorium. We need to push also for a rent moratorium. But basically what people need to do, and what I would just encourage people to do, especially if you're a landlord and you want to provide relief to your tenants, which I encourage everyone to do, is to call your bank and say, due to COVID-19. That's the magic word.
Right, yeah. I heard that the other day, that you can't say anything else or you can't say it the wrong way. You got to say it like in this very specific way. So everybody out there, listen up. This is the way you got to say it.
Yes. So, and this doesn't just apply to your mortgager. This applies to your cell phone bill. It applies to your credit cards. It applies to any bill that you need to pay. Tell people that it's due to COVID-19. You are unable to pay. That's really important, because if you just call and say, I can't pay, they can't really do anything for you, because it's kind of like any other month. If you just call your credit card and say, yo, it's not happening, they're going to be like, well,
I spent too much money this month, my bad.
Yeah. So a lot of companies have internal policies where if the person says, you know, due to COVID-19, they will then, it kind of like triggers a different process where they will start talking to you about forgiveness or deferments or reducing your payment or all these other things. So make sure that you say that it is due to coronavirus, that you are unable to pay, that you've been impacted. And then they'll be able to do a lot of things for you. Because I've had a lot of people kind of say, hey, I called and they didn't do anything. And
Right.
it may have been because they didn't say specifically on the phone that they were impacted by coronavirus.
Okay. Another big one coming in, student loans. What is happening with student loans? Is there relief for that? Is there relief in the stimulus package for that? Or is that kind of something separate that's happening right now?
So thankfully, there is relief in the stimulus package on student loans. Hallelujah, because this is like as big as a mortgage payment for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's at least as big as a car payment, sometimes as big as a mortgage payment. I had a friend that I was bartending with years ago, and she paid almost as much as her rent on her student loan payment. It was totally insane. So if
yeah, I mean, that needs to be
a
reworked anyways, outside of a major pandemic. The next thing that we need to do is like healthcare and student loans.
We need to forgive student loans.
Right, exactly.
But for now, good news is that in the stimulus package, federal student loans, which is the vast majority of student loans, federal student loan payments are suspended until September. So you do not need to pay your student loans until September. Interest has also been suspended. If you are doing there are certain federal student loan forgiveness programs like public service. So if you go into teaching or if you go into public service, your loans are forgiven. There's usually a stipulation that says that'll happen if you don't miss a payment. That has been waived for this period. So you don't have to worry like, okay, if I opt into suspending my student loan payments until September, will I then become ineligible for forgiveness down the road? No, you'll be totally fine. You're totally covered. So you can suspend your student loan payments until September. If you're already kind of a little bit behind on them, it's kind of automatically enacted. Your auto pay, all of that is automatic. I would go to your student loan servicer and go to your student loan servicer's website just to double check how your servicer is dealing with it, because a lot of people use FedLoan or they'll use Navient or they'll use kind of any other servicer. Make sure you go on their website and they'll usually say kind of specifically how you do it on your website, if you have auto pay or anything like that. But know that if you do not pay your student loan this month through September, your credit score will not be dinged. You will not be charged interest. You will not be charged late fees. The government is pretty much going to say, we're going to act as though, it's almost as though you've paid it. Like your balance will still be there. Your balance is essentially frozen. But if you don't pay it, nothing will happen to you until September.
Okay, cool. Okay, next thing. How did they get $500 billion? Where is the money?
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I assume that like corporations might need some money. Like, like I get the small business need money. Like some corporations, this is affecting everyone. Nobody's flying in airplanes, whatever. But like, how on God's earth did we have 500 billion for that? And like, what's the oversight? Where's it going? What's the stipulation? If Elizabeth Warren is not on that oversight committee, just like in there every second, like I'm gonna lead the charge. Where do we sign the petition? We can get it up. But like, talk about the 500 billion bailout money. What kind of regulations? Like, break it down. How did that get in there? We know how it got in there, but like, what's going on? Because I'm pissed.
I'm mad about it.
Pissed.
I'm mad about it because, listen, I understand businesses of all sizes need relief.
Sure.
I get it, but I'm so mad about it because, first of all, we're basically putting large corporations to the front of the line, right? So for small businesses, they're like, okay, you get a loan, you get disaster loans, you get all of these things. If you run a restaurant, if you do all these things, you still they're trying to expedite the process, but you still need to jump through hoops. You still got to fill out forms. You still got to do loans. You still got to have provisions.
You got to figure out how to do it, do the whole thing.
Right. For these big businesses, they get a separate fund whose liquidity is just almost immediately available. And that money's going to flow like 5 minutes after that thing was signed, they could start moving on it. So there's a difference in how businesses are treated if you're a big corporate Wall Street business or if you're a mom and pop small business. And so that's my first problem with this. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy. They get $300 billion in loans. That's what, you know, a lot of and hopefully which will roll over into forgiveness, but that's what they get. We get, and for not we, but big corporations, they get $500 billion. And here's the thing, Megan. Here's the thing.
Give it to me.
It's not just $500 billion. It's not just $500 billion. The Fed is going to take that $500 billion and essentially treat it as a down payment so that they could leverage it into $4 trillion of more liquidity and loans. So we're talking about 0% or low interest loans for American Airlines, for Goldman Sachs, for like whoever. It's just a big old $4 trillion honeypot. And I just think it's so important that people realize that every time we talk about doing things for working people, Medicare for all, a $15 living wage, when we talk about making colleges tuition free, it's how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Meanwhile, and by the way, when working people can't afford to go to college, when working people can't afford their bills, we say, why don't you have 3 to 6 months saved up? Why don't you have 6 months worth of saving in your bank account? American Airlines and, you know, all of these like big banks, they have one bad week and they're like coming to the government saying, you need to bail us out.
Right.
So where's their 3 to 6 months of a savings
That's what
account?
I'm so confused about. I'm like, from everything everybody's saying, business has been a booming lately. Stock market's doing great. The economy's doing great. And like, obviously this is like not just a little bump in the road. We've hit like a massive bump in the road, but immediately we give the biggest bailout to the corporations. Like, and the money's all there. That's why I keep saying. I wanted to ask you earlier about universal basic income, because that's been floated. Bernie Sanders has been talking about that a lot. I'm sure you guys talked about in your conversations when drafting this bill. But like a lot of people are like, well, we can't just like give people money all the time. Like we can't afford it. But like we can afford it. We can afford healthcare. We can afford insurance. We can afford to like give people a living wage. We can afford childcare. We can afford all of these things. So like, it's just a choice. I really hope people are seeing this as like a reckoning of like, when the money needed to be there, it was there. And like, we have it.
Exactly. It's not about,
we just got to choose where we want to put it.
Money. Exactly. It's not that there's not enough money. It's that there's not enough political will. It's that there's not enough people who give a damn about working families enough to treat them on and prioritize them and prioritize us on the same level as you know, as their wealthy donors. And that's ultimately our huge problem. But there are some things, and by the way, when people are saying, oh, the economy's going great, things are going awesome, the thing, it's kind of hard. This is a concept that is a little tricky, but I think it's important for people to understand, because I know that when I was, you know, working in a restaurant and I was bartending, there would be, you know, the TV screens would be on and people would say, oh, you know, the economy's going great. And it didn't feel that way, right? Like I didn't have health insurance. I was barely scraping by, but people are like, the economy's going great. No, the stock market is doing great. Right. The stock market is doing great.
Yeah, and like this many of us are in the stock market.
Yeah, and the thing is that there are so many games that are played to boost stock prices, even when the company isn't legitimately getting more valuable in terms of lived experience, right? So it's like the stock price of a company goes up even though they're not paying their workers more, or the stock price of the company is going up because they're tying their stock prices to increasingly kind of nebulous and ethereal concepts instead of the actual value of what people and companies are providing to society. And so when like all of these companies that were just saying 2 weeks ago, oh, we're doing great, it's because they were taking all of these tax breaks that they got and buying their own stock.
Buybacks,
so American Airlines and like all these folks, they took 96% of all of their kind of free cash flow. And they said, okay, I've got this extra money. What am I going to do? I'm going to buy my own stock on the stock market to boost the price. And by the way, CEO pay is tied to stock price very often. So CEOs are not incentivized. A lot of CEOs are not incentivized to make life better for their workers, to make the product better for people who are, you know, flying. As we know, like our knees are breaking every time we go on a
exactly.
flight. It's not incentivized to make our lives better. It's incentivized to make the stock price go up.
Right. So what kind of regulations and oversight are going to be attached to that 500 billion, if any, and like, how are we going to enforce that? Obviously, we've seen with this administration, it's just fucking wild. Every single day, there's something insane. And it's just so corrupt and really like not giving back to the people. To the majority of people living in this country and working and frankly just like busting their ass to make ends meet. So what kind of regulations are there? How are they going to be enforced? And who's going to be doing that?
So there's some regulations and some strings on this. One is that for companies that take this $500 billion that will be leveraged into trillions of dollars, there are provisions that they cannot raise their CEO's pay. So we saw this in 2008 when we bailed out all of these banks and then they gave bailout money to CEOs. So they can't raise CEO pay. They cannot buy back their own stocks for a certain time period, and they cannot lay off workers until about September 30th. I have a lot of problems with that because
of 2020 or like 2025
of this year. Thank you.
Like what,
first
like 3 months from now?
Exactly. So first of all, I think it's kind of just like a slap on the wrist. And by the way, I think it was United Airlines announced like the evening after the bill was signed, they said, oh, we're going to lay off our workers in September. So I think that, you know, they literally took it to the day and they're going to lay off all of these people, which is really upsetting. But so there are some provisions. Also, I think that there's also loopholes put in there to even erode those already not good enough kind of oversight provisions. And also, here's the big problem, is that Steve Mnuchin, who's Trump's Treasury Secretary, gets pretty much final say on the disbursement of all of these funds. So now we have this huge corrupt pay-for-play situation where if you kind of the administration a little bit, they'll give you a little
very clear.
back. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And importantly, they can also deny other companies from preferential treatment and other municipalities as well. So there's a whole lot of problems with it. The oversight provisions, in addition to that, are also just like not good enough either. But there are two things. One is that Congress said, okay, we want to appoint an inspector general. So each agency in the government, whether it's the IRS or whether it's DHS, whether it's FEMA, there's this one kind of person that's known as an inspector general whose job it is to just look around and see if there's any funny business going on. And they report to Congress. And so there's an inspector general who is appointed to this fund. In his signing statement that Trump made when he signed this thing, he said, I'm not going to pay attention to that. So that's going to be a fight already. And the second thing, as you mentioned, is that there's this 5-person panel, oversight panel, that is set up to look at the administration of this $500 billion. Now, who are those 5 people? They kind of gamed it out where the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, gets to appoint one person. Chuck Schumer gets to appoint one person. Mitch McConnell gets to appoint one person. And Kevin McCarthy gets to appoint one person. And that 5th person is kind of a compromise between, I believe, Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. So those are the 5 people that are going to make it up. And that's who gets to appoint them. It could be members of Congress. It could be other people that are appointed to this. But, you know, I think that we can put bulldogs on there, but my only issue is I don't think 5 people are enough to look at what's happening to $4 trillion. As brilliant as those people could be. But also, they don't get say. So what they do is like they can try to see what's happening, but they can't tell the administration, no, you can't do this.
Do this
they
or
can't
do that.
block
Right.
it.
They
They
have,
don't
yeah.
give permission. They literally just kind of like look and tell us what's happening, but they can't stop what's happening. So there's a lot of problems, but those are the things that are in there.
Okay. All right. Getting back to the bill, what are the misconceptions about the bill? What's the average person sort of getting wrong? How good is this bill? And like what are the misconceptions about it? And what should people know about it that we maybe don't know about it?
So some misconceptions, some people or a lot of people are asking me, is this going to be taxed? Like this, you know, the $1,200. $1,200 will not be taxed.
Okay.
So it will not be taxed and it will not be placed as taxable income. So that's something that's very important. It's not going to bump you up. It's not going to be taken out. So it will not be taxed. Secondly, you know, people say, okay, it's for people making $75,000. What if I make $75,001? It doesn't go from 1,200 to zero. It doesn't just like cut off like that. There are steps down. So it goes down by about like $100 increments, I think.
Okay.
But it goes down by increments and up to $99,000. So if you're basically making 99,000 or about 100 grand, that's when you get zero. But it's basically, it starts at $1,200 and then it steps down until about $99,000 per year. It gets doubled for couples. So if you are part of a couple, each person gets a $1,200 check. And that's how that works. Is this a good bill? I mean, here's the thing. 2/3 of the government are controlled by Republicans right now. So I give this bill.
It's about 1/3 good.
1/3 trying to do their best, given the situation.
Yeah.
So I think accordingly, you know, it's 2/3 not great, 1/3 all right. And so I give this bill, if I'm being generous, I'm giving it like a C-.
Yeah.
But, and I'm just keeping it real with everybody, because the fact of the matter is that elections matter. And when you have a president when you have a president that's uninterested in giving more, when you have a Senate that's uninterested in giving more, it's really, 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 really hard to get a good bill passed. And so keep that in mind. Make sure y'all's voter registration is up to date and that you turn out this year, because that's the only way that this situation changes.
Yeah, I think that's like some big takeaways that I have from this is like, shout out Stacey Abrams, get your census done. Let's get the federal money everywhere that it can be and get everybody counted. And then the elections are huge. I think, you know, once again, we've seen, you know, not only, I mean, in the face of no crisis is like this, but really in the face of a crisis like we've really never seen before in our lifetime, where people are struggling and they're scared and they don't know what to do and they need help. It's become very clear who's important, who's not important, where the money's going, who's getting it first, who's getting it easily, and just what this administration is all about. So from the people, AOC, we thank you so much for getting on here and giving it to people real and hopefully answering some questions that people had. I know I have like a million questions about this. I've been trying to get on and understand it so I can speak intelligently about it at least a little bit. But we appreciate you so much. Is there anything that we can do, like just as like normal people, like what can we do in these times to kind of wrap this up?
Yeah, totally. Well, you mentioned one super duper important thing, which is we're all stuck in our house. Fill your census form and ask your parents to fill their census form and help your family. You know, if you have family that doesn't speak English or needs some help, census has a ton of language support, but make sure everyone you know fills the census. Most of us, or a lot of us, are cooped up inside. It's so important because the census determines how much money your community gets for the next 10 years. It determines how many members of Congress your community gets for the next 10 years. And there are communities that have very low self-reporting rates. You know, in Brooklyn, some of the self-reporting rates are like 55%, or as low as 55%. And it's understandable because sometimes people get scared. They say, I don't want to give the government my information, blah, blah, blah. It's super simple. You're not like divulging all like your life.
Yeah, it's really easy. It doesn't take very long.
It's just a few questions. And very importantly, fill it out if you are undocumented. There is no question about your citizenship status on the census, none at all. We are supposed to count every single human being in the United States. Whether you're undocumented, whether you are housing insecure, it doesn't matter who you are. You matter, your life matters, and counting you, make sure that we are apportioning representation and funding and resources to you and your community. And you know, for a lot of people that say, hey, like the books in my school are torn up, we have 30 kids to a classroom. A lot of times that happens in communities where the census has undercounted people. And so literally, like, there aren't enough resources for there isn't a lot of school funding because the government literally doesn't know that your kid exists. So make sure that you fill out the census. Kids are actually one of the most undercounted populations, children under 5. So make sure that you're counting kids. And also, you know, if you're free, if you're able, we did a training on mutual aid, you know, from our campaign. Basically, if you're able to help people, put up a sign on your door if you live in an apartment building, or put it on your mailbox, say, hey, like, I'm willing to go on a grocery run for you, or I'm willing to watch your kids for you for an evening if you need to go out and go grocery shopping yourself. Check in on the elderly folks in your community. Sometimes just give them a call. You know, social isolation is a very difficult thing for a lot of people. And so make sure you're just, sometimes all that your elderly neighbors need is just to talk to somebody. And we've been doing phone banking in our campaign. Like, you can just go to ocasio-cortez.com/events, and we do events where we just call people and check in on them. And sometimes people just want to talk to someone. And that really helps too, a lot.
I love that. I know. I think one thing that I've realized out of all this is just how important, like, those social relationships are and that community is to us. I think, like, before this, it was, you know, we just get so caught up in our lives and this is that, but like, what's everybody going back to right now? They're going to FaceTime, they're going to Zoom, they're having the conversations with each other, they miss each other, they just want to, like, have that sense of community. And so I feel like that's just such a huge thing. Just check in on people, do everything that you can, keep yourself safe, keep everyone else safe. Again, to all the people on the front line, healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, people who clean the hospitals, everyone who, you know, is setting up a whole new hospital at the Javits Center, to all of the gig workers out there still delivering us all our things and keeping this world going. There's no amount of thank yous in the world for you guys. We owe you everything. And again, thank you so much for coming on. This was so much fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving it to us real. Everybody, vote in November. We would have had a better COVID relief package.
Please change who I work
with.
with.
The money is there. The money is there.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, how do I do it? Okay. See, I know
Wait. No. Yeah, it'll pop up. Hold on. Just said she did it. I'm just gonna FaceTime her because I don't want to fuck this up.
I feel like it's end and
Yeah,
then it's
and then
up
it's up
there.
there. All right, do it.
Because only there's no other choice.
Otherwise, you just record the way you did it.